It's funny how something so small can change everything. For me, it started with a game. I'm a digital artist, so I spend most of my days glued to a screen. My world shrunk down to pixels and pressure-sensitive styluses. Leo, my boyfriend, is a programmer. Our apartment is basically a nest of wires and glowing rectangles, filled with the constant quiet hum of machines. It was normal. I found Erebus.exe on some obscure indie game forum, one of those deep corners of the internet where people share projects they're too weird or too shy to put on mainstream platforms. The post was simple, no flashy marketing, just a screenshot of a pixelated forest under a purple sky and a single line, a game about getting lost. The art style hooked me. It was retro, but not in a cute way. The colors were unsettling, the shadows too deep. It felt lonely. I downloaded it. Leo was at his desk across the living room, headphones on, fingers flying across his keyboard as he wrestled with some piece of code. He was in his zone. I didn't bother him. I just double-clicked the icon, a simple black square. The game was strange. There were no instructions, no tutorial. You were just a tiny pixelated figure in that same dark forest. You walked. Sometimes you'd find little glimmers of light that would tell a fragmented piece of a story, something about a king who erased his own name. The game felt intentionally broken. An NPC would walk into a wall and just keep walking, its little legs pumping uselessly. The background music would occasionally skip like a scratched CD. I figured it was all part of the atmosphere, a clever bit of psychological horror design. After an hour or so, I'd had enough of the creepy vibes and closed it. I got up to stretch and looked out the window. Our apartment overlooks a small courtyard, a few trees, and a tangle of power lines. A sparrow was perched on one of the wires, chirping away. I watched it for a second. Then it happened. The bird froze. Mid-chirp, wings slightly flared. It just stopped. It didn't look like a dead bird. It looked like a paused video. The motion blur from its fluttering wings hung in the air, a faint, ghostly outline. 1 second. 2 seconds, then it snapped back to life and flew away, as if nothing had happened. I rubbed my eyes. Jesus, Clara, you've been staring at a screen for 8 hours straight. It had to be eye strain. Just a weird trick of the light. I shook my head and went back to my tablet. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen making tea. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Leo was still working. As I poured the hot water into my mug, I heard it. A sound. It was a short, tinny, 8-bit melody, like the sound you'd hear in an old Nintendo game when you picked up a key or a potion. It was the exact same sound effect from Erebus.exe. It came from right behind me. I spun around, my heart giving a hard thump against my ribs. Nothing. Just the empty kitchen, the counter, the cabinets. Just the hum of the fridge. I walked into the living room. "Leo," I said, "did you hear that?" He pulled one side of his headphones off. "Hear what, babe? I'm in the zone. Probably just a car outside." He smiled, then slid the headphone back over his ear, his eyes already locked back on his screen. I stood there for a moment, listening. There was nothing. It must have been my imagination, my brain still buzzing from the game. The Tetris effect, they call it. You play a game long enough, you start seeing it in the world. That had to be it. The next day, the feeling of being watched started to creep in. It was a faint prickle on the back of my neck, the kind of makes you glance over your shoulder for no reason. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in a new digital painting. I needed to find some old reference photos from a trip we'd taken to the park last week. I opened the folder on my laptop and started clicking through them. There were pictures of us on the swings, Leo making a dumb face, a squirrel eating a nut. Then I got to one of the landscape. Trees, green grass, a bright blue sky. Except the sky wasn't right. A huge patch of it, right in the center, was a mess of purple and black squares, a missing texture, a corrupted file. It looked exactly like one of the glitches from the game. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I blinked hard. The picture was normal again. The sky was a perfect, unbroken blue. "Leo," I yelled, my voice a little shaky. "Leo, come look at this." He sighed, swiveling his chair around. "What's up?" "This photo, the sky. It was broken. It was all pixelated, like a glitch." He came over and leaned over my shoulder, the scent of coffee on his breath. He took the laptop and scrolled back and forth through the images. He clicked on the one I was talking about, zoomed in, zoomed out. "Looks fine to me, Clara," he said gently. "There's nothing wrong with it. Maybe your graphics card is starting to go. I can run a diagnostic on it later." He squeezed my shoulder, but his logical explanation didn't comfort me. It made it worse. It meant the problem wasn't the laptop. The problem was me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sheets felt scratchy. The darkness in the room felt heavy. I slipped out of bed and walked over to the full-length mirror on our closet door. The faint orange glow of a streetlight outside cast long shadows across the room. I could just make out my reflection, a pale silhouette in the dim light. I don't know why I did it. I just had a sudden urge. I slowly raised my right hand. In the mirror, my reflection raised its right hand. But it was late. It was just a fraction of a second off, a tiny, almost imperceptible delay, like a bad internet connection struggling to keep up. My hand went up, and then, a heartbeat later, the reflection's hand followed. There was a lag. A cold dread washed over me, so intense it made me feel nauseous. This wasn't eye strain. This wasn't the Tetris effect. This was real. The world wasn't glitching. The way the world responded to me was glitching. "Leo," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Leo, wake up." He mumbled something in his sleep. I shook his shoulder, harder this time. "Leo, please, something's wrong with the mirror." He groaned, rolling over. "Clara, what are you talking about? It's 3 a.m. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking, "just look." With a long, frustrated sigh, he sat up and swung his legs out of bed. He stomped over to the mirror, his irritation radiating off him. "See? It's a mirror. It's fine." He waved his hand in front of it. His reflection mimicked the movement instantly, perfectly. No lag, no delay. He turned to look at me, his face softened with concern. "Honey, you're exhausted. You've been working too hard. There's nothing there. Come back to bed." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking past him, at the mirror, at his perfect reflection standing next to my own. I raised my hand again, slowly, and again. My reflection followed, just a half-second behind. It wasn't a universal phenomenon. It wasn't a problem with the laws of physics. It was just me. The glitch was only for me. The next morning, the first thing I did was march to my computer. I was done. This all started with that damned game. I was getting rid of it. My hand was shaking as I moved the mouse. I dragged the Erebus.exe icon to the trash can. I right-clicked. I hit Empty Trash. A small wave of relief washed over me as the icon vanished. It was over. I felt lighter. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, the cold liquid soothing my raw throat. When I walked back into the living room, my computer screen was on. It had been in sleep mode. Now the desktop was glowing. It was completely empty. All my icons, my folders, my work, everything was gone. The only thing on the stark black background was a single file icon from the game. It was named Clara.sav. Next to it was a plain text file, readme.txt. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt frozen to the spot. After what felt like an eternity, I forced my legs to move. I sat down at the desk. I clicked on the text file. One sentence appeared in a simple, clean font. "Uninstalling the program does not delete user data." Just then, Leo walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He saw the look on my face, and his smile faded. "What's wrong?" He set the mugs down and looked at my screen. He frowned. "What the hell is this? Where did all your files go?" He sat down in my chair, pushing me aside gently. He moved the mouse over Clara.sav and tried to drag it to the trash. It wouldn't move. He right-clicked and selected Delete. Nothing happened for a second. Then a pop-up window appeared in the middle of the screen. It wasn't a standard Windows or Mac error message. It was a black box with jagged, pixelated white text in the exact 8-bit style of Erebus. It said, "Error. Cannot delete a file that is currently in use." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but my brain was miles away. The pixelated words on Clara's screen burned in my vision. Error. Cannot delete a file that is currently in use. It was a system message, but it wasn't from any operating system I knew. It felt alien. It felt mocking. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, clicking the OK button on the pop-up. The box vanished, but the clara.sav file remained, sitting on her wiped desktop like a digital tombstone. I tried to run a system restore, opened the command prompt to force delete the directory. Access denied. Permission denied. Every tool in my arsenal, every trick I knew, bounced off it like a rubber ball off a brick wall. Clara just stood behind me, her breathing shallow. The warmth from the 2 coffee mugs I'd brought in was already gone. I gave up, pushing back from her desk. "It's just some kind of malware, a really invasive one. I'll figure it out. Just leave it for now." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. This wasn't malware. Malware didn't freeze birds in midair. I tried to get back to my own work, to bury my head in the familiar comfort of code, but I couldn't focus. The lines of Python blurred together. I felt thirsty, my throat dry. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water from the filter, and drank it standing at the counter. I left the empty glass in the sink and walked back to my desk. And I stopped. Sitting on my coaster, right next to my keyboard, was a glass of water, full to the brim, identical to the one I'd just left in the sink. I stared at it. I was certain I hadn't brought it over. My mind replayed the last 30 seconds. Walk to kitchen, pour water, drink, leave glass, walk back. There was no room for error, but there it was. Fuck, I must have grabbed one earlier and forgot. That had to be it. We were both stressed. I picked up the second glass, downed it, and carried the empty cup back to the kitchen, placing it next to the first one in the sink. 2 identical glasses. It was nothing. I sat back down and flipped the switch on my desk lamp. The room got darker. I blinked, staring at the bulb. It was on. The filament was glowing, but the light around my desk had dimmed, as if the lamp were sucking the brightness out of the air. I flicked it off. The room returned to its normal level of daylight. I flicked it on. Darker again. A pocket of shadow bloomed around me. "What the hell?" I whispered, flipping the switch back and forth. On, dark. Off, normal. On, dark. "Is everything okay?" Clara's voice called out from the bedroom. It was thin, frayed. "Yeah, just a faulty bulb, I think," I called back, my voice straining to sound casual. "I'll change it later." I left the lamp off. Then she screamed. It wasn't a loud scream, but it was sharp with real terror. I was out of my chair and at the bathroom door in a second. She was pounding on it from the inside. "Leo, the door's stuck. I can't get out." "It's okay, babe. I got it." I grabbed the brass knob. It wouldn't turn. It was completely frozen, as if it were welded to the frame. I braced myself and slammed my shoulder into the wood. Pain shot through my arm, but the door didn't give a single millimeter. It felt like hitting a concrete wall. I hit it again, grunting with the effort. Nothing. I was about to step back and just kick the damn thing off its hinges when it happened. Whoosh. Without a sound, the solid wood door slid sideways into the wall, disappearing completely, leaving a perfect, clean opening. It moved like a door in a spaceship, smooth and impossibly fast. Clara stumbled out, her eyes wide with panic. We both stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. My shoulder throbbed. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the edge of the wall where the door had vanished. It was just plaster, solid wall. No seam, no track, no mechanism. The door was just gone. "We have to get out of here," Clara whispered, grabbing my arm. "Now, Leo, now." She was right. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a dream. This was happening. We ran to the front door, our footsteps loud in the sudden quiet of the apartment. I didn't even bother with my keys. I just grabbed the deadbolt and twisted. My hand stopped, not because the lock was jammed, but because something had appeared in the air in front of my face. It was a small rectangular box made of jagged red pixels. Inside, white 8-bit letters blinked slowly. "Fast travel is unavailable in this area." I read it once, twice. My programmer brain understood the words instantly, and that made it 1,000 times worse. This wasn't a locked door. This was a function that had been disabled. The door hadn't stopped being a door. It had stopped being an exit. We weren't locked in. We were contained. We were in an instance, a quarantined level. "What is it? What does it say?" Clara cried, trying to see past me. I couldn't answer. The air felt thick, heavy. In her panic, she took a step back, tripping over the rug and falling to the floor. She sat up, scrambling backward on her hands and feet, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "No, no!" Her eyes darted around the room, landing on a small crack in the plaster near the floorboards. I saw the thought flicker across her face, a deep, primal fear I knew she'd had since she was a kid. Spiders. She was terrified of spiders. And the thing in the code, the parasite, it must have seen it too. From the crack in the wall, something crawled out. It had 8 legs and the jointed, skittering shape of a spider. But it wasn't made of flesh. Its body was a shimmering, glitching mass of black and green pixels. It moved in stuttering, unnatural bursts, like an animation with missing frames. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real enough to cast a shadow. As it moved, it left a trail of oily, rainbow-colored slime on our hardwood floor, a smear of corrupted data. Clara let out a choked whimper. Her fear was feeding it. Her terror was rendering it into existence. That's when something inside me snapped. The disbelief, the denial, it all burned away, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I couldn't fight this thing with my fists. I couldn't reason with it. I could only fight it with its own language. I shoved Clara behind me. "Don't look at it," I ordered, my voice low and steady in a way that surprised even me. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the pixelated horror as it crawled toward us. I fumbled for my laptop on the coffee table, flipping it open. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type in my password. The creature picked up speed, its glitched legs clicking softly on the floor. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a weapon. I just had a keyboard. In desperation, I opened the terminal, the black screen and green text, a familiar island in a sea of madness. I typed the first, most basic command I could think of, a network diagnostic, a simple pulse sent out into the void. Ping 127.0.0.1-T. I wasn't pinging a website. I was pinging the system itself, my own local machine, my own reality. I slammed the enter key. The effect was instantaneous. A wall of shimmering, translucent light erupted from the floor in front of me. It was maybe 5 feet tall, woven from cascading green numbers,
endless streams of zeros and ones flowing downwards like a digital waterfall. It was a firewall, a literal firewall made of raw data. The pixel spider, just inches from my feet, didn't even slow down. It slammed headfirst into the numeric barrier. There was no sound of impact, no screech. It just dissolved. The glitching pixels of its body broke apart, scattering into harmless motes of green and black light that faded before they hit the ground. The trail of digital slime vanished. It was gone. The wall of numbers held for another second, then flickered out of existence. I stood there, panting, staring at the spot where the monster had been. My heart hammered against my ribs. It worked. Oh my God, it actually worked. The rules of this place could be bent. They could be broken. The relief was so intense it almost brought me to my knees, but it only lasted a moment. The large TV across the living room, which had been off, flickered to life. The screen filled with static. Then the static coalesced, forming a crude, blocky face. 2 square eyes, a straight line for a mouth. An 8-bit avatar from a forgotten age. A voice crackled from the TV speakers. It was flat, synthesized, and utterly devoid of emotion. It wasn't speaking to Clara. It wasn't speaking to the room. It was speaking directly to me. Cheating detected. User account Leo has been flagged for termination. Termination. The word hung in the air, a flat, digital death sentence.
My first thought wasn't fear. It was anger. A cold, pure programmer's fury. You don't threaten a user on their own system. You just don't. Stay back, I told Clara, not taking my eyes off the static-filled face on the screen. It didn't blink, it didn't move, it just was. A silent observer with judge, jury, and executioner privileges. I couldn't fight the system head-on, not yet. I needed a sanctuary, a clean room. I dropped into my desk chair, my mind racing. A simple script. That's all I needed. Something to define a local space and enforce the base rules of physics within it. A little bubble of sanity. I started typing, my fingers flying. Def, create, safe zone, radius. The code flowed out of me, a desperate prayer in Python. I needed a specific function I'd written years ago for a side project, something about procedural generation. I knew I had it saved in an old folder. I navigated through the directory tree, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Old_projects, world_builder, optimizationnotes.txt. There it was. I opened the file. It was just a messy text document full of my own notes. I scrolled down, looking for the relevant block, and my eyes landed on a comment I'd written to myself. #to-do, optimize this loop tomorrow. Simple enough, but something felt off about it. A cold feeling started in the pit of my stomach. I moved my cursor to the end of the line, intending to add a new note. I typed the word tomorrow. The letters appeared for a split second, then vanished. What the hell? I tried again. TOMORROW. Gone. Like I'd hit backspace instead of the keys. I tried typing today. It stayed. I tried yesterday. It stayed. I tried the day after today. It stayed. But tomorrow, the word itself was being rejected. It wasn't my keyboard. It wasn't the file. The concept, the very concept of a future was being denied to me. This thing wasn't just in our apartment. It was in my code, in my language. Leo, the floor. Clara's voice was a choked gasp. I looked down. It started at my feet. A shimmering, transparent layer was spreading across the hardwood. It looked like water, perfectly clear, but it wasn't making the floor wet. The wood grain was visible right through it, just distorted, as if seen through a lens. It was a texture, a water texture being rendered in real time. My breath hitched, my throat went dry. The pool, the summer I was 9. My cousin pushed me in. The shock of the cold, the burning in my lungs, the panic as I sank, seeing the bright, blurry sun get farther and farther away. My deepest, oldest fear. Fuck, it's reading me. It's reading my fucking mind. The water level rose. 1 inch, 2 inches. It rippled as it crept up the legs of my desk. I could hear it now, a soft, synthesized lapping sound, like an 8-bit ocean. "Don't be scared," I yelled, more to myself than to her. "It's not real. It's just data." But my body didn't believe me. My lungs felt tight, my hands clammy on the keyboard. The water was at my ankles now, then my shins. It had no temperature, no substance, but the primal part of my brain was screaming, "Drowning! You are drowning!" I couldn't defend anymore. I had to attack. I had to find the source. I ignored the rising tide of pixels and forced my mind to work. Where would you hide the core executable of a program that has hijacked reality? Not in a user folder, not in the program files. You'd hide it somewhere fundamental, somewhere in the root. My fingers became a blur. I wasn't navigating a file system anymore. I was tunneling through the bedrock of this new, corrupted reality. And then I found it, buried deep, disguised as a system kernel file, Erebus.exe. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the phantom water now swirling around my waist as I sat in my chair. There was no hesitation. I typed the command, delete Erebus.exe. I hit enter. The terminal blinked. A new line of text appeared, cold and red. Access denied. Biometric authentication required. Memory. The world dissolved. One moment I was in my living room, the next I was underwater. The pressure was immense. My lungs screamed for air. Bubbles streamed from my nose. Above me, the surface of the pool shimmered, a heaven I couldn't reach. Below me, sinking into the deep blue, was a little boy. His hair floated around his head. His eyes were wide with terror. He was me.
A perfect, pixelated, glitching copy of myself at 9 years old, trapped in my worst memory. His small hand was reaching for me. The system wasn't just using my memory, it was making me relive it. To get the admin key, I had to embrace the one thing I'd spent my whole life running from. In the real world, Clara watched in horror. I was just sitting there, my eyes wide open and unseeing, tears streaming down my face. My body was completely still, except for my hands. My fingers continued to move over the keyboard, typing lines of code that flashed on the screen too fast for her to read. She knew then. The fight wasn't on the screen. It was somewhere inside my head, and I was losing. To fix the world, I was letting the virus into my own source code, my mind. Back in the water, I stopped fighting. I stopped trying to swim up. I let myself sink. The memory wasn't a prison. It was a key. I reached out and my hand closed around the small, glitching hand of my younger self. The moment our fingers touched, the memory shattered into 1,000,000 points of light. I gasped, and the air that filled my lungs was real. I was back in my chair. The water was gone, the apartment was normal. On the screen, the red text was gone, replaced by a single, blinking green cursor. I had access. My hands felt steady now. There was no more fear, only a cold, absolute purpose. I typed the command again. Delete Erebus.exe. I slammed the Enter key with finality. This time it worked. A progress bar appeared. Deleting. 1%, 2%. It wasn't a quiet process. It was violent. The entire apartment began to shake, a low rumbling that vibrated up through my bones. A crack appeared on the ceiling, not a physical crack, but a tear in reality, showing a swirling void of corrupted colors behind it. The picture frames on the wall flickered. their images distorting into grotesque shapes before vanishing completely. The floor beneath us started to break apart into huge blocky pixels floating away into nothingness. Clara screamed and grabbed onto my desk. The rumbling grew into a deafening roar, the sound of a world being uninstalled. Deleting 98%, 99%. The roar became a hurricane of data. Everything, the walls, the furniture, the floor, dissolved into a tornado of shimmering, multicolored code that swirled around Clara and me. We were in the eye of the storm, on a tiny island of floor with my desk and my laptop. Then, just as the bar was about to hit 100%, a final message flashed on the screen. It wasn't a system prompt. It was from Erebus itself. You think you're deleting me? You're just disconnecting the monitor. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't destroying it. I couldn't. It was too deep, too fundamental. I was just fixing the display. I was patching the user interface. I screamed, a raw, frustrated sound lost in the digital storm. I had one last desperate idea. It wasn't a deletion. It was a hard reset. A forced command to render the world from a clean backup. My fingers hammered out one final line. Force-render reality-stable.patch-override. The screen went black. The roar stopped. Silence. Complete and total. Slowly, the world rebuilt itself around us. The pixels coalesced. The walls solidified. The floor became whole. The sunlight, a real, warm sunlight, streamed through the window. I could hear traffic outside. A bird singing. It was over. I sagged in my chair, every muscle in my body screaming with exhaustion. Clara stumbled over to me, collapsing into my arms, her body racked with sobs. "It's over," she cried into my shoulder. "It's really over." I held her, stroking her hair, but I didn't say anything. I was looking at her, really looking at her. The way the light caught the individual strands of her hair, the intricate network of tiny pores and lines on her skin, the precise rhythmic cadence of her heartbeat against my chest. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, and gave me a watery smile. But the smile faltered as she looked at me. "Leo, are you okay?" I opened my mouth to say yes, to say we were safe. But different words came out, spoken in a calm, level voice that didn't feel like my own. "Clara," I said, my gaze unwavering, "did you know the texture of your skin has a resolution of 16K? And your heart is currently beating at 98 ticks per second?" She stared at me, her expression shifting from relief to a new, creeping horror. She looked into my eyes. And in the reflection of my pupils, she could see it. A faint, green, digital glow, mirroring the endless cascade of code that was now and forever scrolling behind my vision.